Today on Unity Motorsports Garage, the search for more power continues. Stay tuned. So as you can see here, I've already started taking the linkage off of the carburetors. Going to get the carburetors off, get this 1/2 inch 4-hole spacer off, and then swap on these. I had to go with a clover leaf design to match the flange of the intake where I modified it. So I could only get 1 inch spacer, so I had to get 4. So as you can see here, this is the difference of what was on it and what we're putting on it. We're starting out with the 1 inch spacers, mainly because I run into a situation with my studs not being quite long enough. So I'm going to get some all thread to make some longer studs. But for now, we're going to do a 1 inch spacer test open. On this particular manifold here, you have to run a spacer of some sort so that the throttle linkage there will actually clear the intake manifold. Just so you know, that's the reason why the 4-hole was on there to start with. So we're going to get this thing situated. One of the most aggravating things when running a tunnel ram setup like this with the carburetor sideways is getting the throttle linkage actually right. Since we put spacers, went from a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, it changed the geometry of the linkage itself, and so you always have to play around so that you can get it where the throttle blade will actually be closed and you can still get wide open throttle. So just know that going into a tunnel ram setup with the carburetor sideways. Alright, first test with the spacers. We'll see what happens. Alright, so we made the first run. It was a complete waste because the distributor actually turned in higher RPMs. But once we did that, we made another backup run and we're at 683 and 588. So the spacers were a step in the right direction. But the difference being on the driver's side, air-fuel ratios are all over the place. So I've got to start pulling jet, adding jet, and then see what we get on the next run. Okay, looking here, this is the driver's side bank of cylinders on the run that we just made. You can see that this one is still extremely lean at, well, 13.3, and then this one down here, you got 12.5, 12.7, and this one here is 12.3. So what we did is change the jetting according to that. -3 out of 5, -2 out of 6, +2 and 7, -2 and 8. So we'll see what this does.
So this fan on, Dyno on,
we're going to see what effects the jetting had, and we got to wait for the atmosphere to stabilize in the dyno cell. Maybe it'll pick up a few numbers. It did. The last few are always like pulling teeth. Alright, temperature stabilized. He's getting ready to make a pull. Greg, you think we're going to make any improvement? Survey says
687, 588.
687, 588.
AFR numbers.
Well, that's funky.
Yeah.
Really wasn't enough to make a difference, was it? Alright, it is like day 6 or something. I've done lost count of the dyno days. But I'm back over here. Me and Dennis has been knocking out making new carb studs for the 2-inch spacers here. Just using simple all thread. There's the old ones. So yeah, I hope to get the spacers on there and make another run. We ended the day yesterday making 690.5 horsepower and 590.7, I think, foot-pounds of torque. So we're going in the right direction. We got the cylinder jetting kind of ironed out on the driver's side as best we could. Now the spacers will probably change the tune-up slightly, so that's why we're having to do this and see what effect it has on it, and then we will go from there. So I've got the linkage ironed out. I've got it where it's going wide open throttle. And you can see the length of this rod is considerably longer than the one I had. This is the one that was on it. So unless you have a ton of this stuff laying around, making changes to spacers and things like that on a tunnel rim setup such as this can be kind of frustrating. But we're getting ready to warm the engine up, bring it up to temperature, make a run, and see what the effect of these new spacers have on the power output. And then once we're finished with that, we're actually going to drain the break-in oil out of it and put in a synthetic. How you doing today, Greg?
Very good. Can't wait to see what happens here.
I can't either. It should be good. Okay, so we just made the run with the extra spacer here, and to be honest, guys and gals, it was completely indifferent. Pretty much laid over the same graph that we did yesterday evening. 680 horsepower and 590 foot-pounds of torque. But the one thing that it did do was it equalized the air-fuel ratio.
Ratios, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the fuel has more room to basically mix.
Right.
A little bit more space, yeah. Volume.
But the thing about it is, and we have talked about it, no matter what we do up here, if the restriction is here, it's not going to make a difference. And I think that's where we're at. We're at the point of no return as far as plenum volume, because the real restriction is the manifold itself. That is what's holding this engine back. So for the last thing that we're going to do is, this thing is still has break-in oil in it. So we're going to drain it out, and we're going to put 6.5 quarts of VP synthetic 30 weight oil and see what it does, because you know, synthetic should be worth a few ponies in itself, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Alright, so we're draining this break-in oil out of here, and one thing that I want to point out is, even though we've been beating on this thing, you can look and see that it has a little bit of swirl to it. That is not bearing material. That is the normal break-in sludge that you get out of an engine. So when you build your first engine and you see that, don't really get paranoid, but the main thing is look for chunks. You know, little brass or bronze pieces. That's the important part, because that's actually your bearing material. So the question is, what did we start with and what did we end up with? This tells the story right here. This was the initial pull that we made out past 7,000, and you can see all of the meat that we picked up, not just in one spot, pretty much throughout the entire curve, and that is all due to tuning that could otherwise not be done unless it was done on a dyno. Those are the things that I wouldn't be able to see in the truck. Well, actually I could, but the amount of time and effort to get that would have been astronomical. Ask me how I know, because I've been there and done it. So what are our takeaways from this whole experience?
Well, I would say that it's interesting how many steps it took to get to where we ended up.
The thing about it is, and we've all done this before, it takes, sometimes finding the last little bit of power is like pulling teeth, basically.
Well, I've heard it said that to get the first 90%, not too difficult. To get the next 5%, starts to get a little more difficult. To get that last 5%, that's where
it's actually it's called the Pareto rule. Like,
that's right.
You put in 20% effort to get 80% of the results.
Right.
And to get the last 20%, you need to put in 80% more work.
Yeah, that last 5%, you better have it right.
I think for the big takeaway of that particular engine, don't get me wrong, I'm extremely happy with the power that it made. 691 and some change. That is pretty much my goal. It would have been nice to see that 700 number, I think. You know, it would have been like a yeah moment, but realistically, we're there.
Well, and it has to be said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on probably any other dyno, you would have seen way over 700.
Oh yeah, it would have probably been 720 or 730, all because we paid close attention to the correction factors that you were using, the detail oriented, making sure that we had good consistent runs. You know, no variables. That is key to, when you're trying to find a small amount of horsepower, is being as consistent as you possibly can. The thing that I learned the most is, I thought, well, that 50-year-old Cleveland manifold would be a ticket, but it's pretty much a dud. That is the thing that's holding that engine back the most, in my opinion.
I think so.
Because there's simply not enough cross-sectional area in it. And once we put the second spacer on it, it was indifferent. What do y'all think about that?
No plenum volume. Well, that tells you basically where the bottleneck is, because if you just keep adding plenum volume, you would think there's a noticeable improvement.
Right.
But the plenum volume really didn't do almost anything, besides stabilizing the AFRs, but that's it.
But I have to give huge thanks to these two guys here, because they have literally bent over backwards to accommodate me and Project Mixed Up Balls coming into their home, allowing me to wreck their home. It's gonna take 2 days to get the place cleaned up, because I've made a mess, guys. But there are some things that we want to talk about. I actually had a viewer that suggested that we do a GoFundMe page. Now, I'm going to put it out here. These guys haven't charged me not one extra cent for all of this time and effort. And I think that speaks volumes to their character and their willingness to get that over that magic number, even though we fell short. So we've talked about doing this GoFundMe. I'm going to put a link to it at the bottom of the video so that you can go and donate, and all of that money is going to go to these guys and their efforts, because I personally feel that the average viewer is going to pick up a lot of information that they wouldn't have known otherwise through this 3 or 4 video series that we've been doing. I'm excited to be able to work with these guys in the future on other projects. Since being here, we've talked about another race engine challenge. So I want to ask you, the viewer, yes, I'm talking to you, put it in the comments below what you think should be done to get another engine dyno competition in America, because it's gone. There was only 2. We know about the Engine Masters, and then Greg here, when they stepped out of the way, he stepped up to the plate to fill the void. And since COVID, it's kind of gotten everything in a mess. So we were talking about actually creating a YouTube, something that would cater to the average Joe, the average guy that could relate to, not some exotic engine that you have no ability to obtain. So put it in the comments. If you want to see something like that, let us know. That way we can start making plans accordingly. And I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Yeah.
So until next time, I'm going to take my 692 horsepower mixed up boss to the house. And this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later. Now y'all say it at the same time. Catch you later.
Catch you later.
1, 2, 3.
Catch you later.
See you guys.
Going into the Atlanta 500, one of engines and one of tires. The Boss 429, Ford's newest racing stock car engine. The most powerful engine ever built. 600 horsepower, 623 pounds, and that makes it one of the heaviest ever built.